Good morning. Welcome to NAIOP Colorado's virtual property tour and case study series featuring NAIOP's 2020 Industrial Development of the Year, Parc Santa Fe, developed by LaPour and Jackson-Shaw. My name is Brian Dietz. I'm a Vice President and Investment Officer with Prologis, NAIOP Colorado board member, and I'm a former chair of the programs committee, which plans this program. This case study series this year is in lieu of our typical large property tour that we do that is typically focused around a neighborhood. But because of COVID, we've had to go virtual, so we've decided to do a case study series highlighting our award winners from the 2020 Awards of Achievement. Today's program will include an interactive discussion with key members of LaPour, the developer of the project, and the development team, ranging in topics from site selection and financing to unique design elements, development and construction opportunities, and challenges. We have a few announcements and event reminders before we begin. We want to thank our series sponsors, sustaining sponsor Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, supporting sponsors Newmark, Alcorn Construction and Interior Environments, and our feature project partners, LaPour and Jackson-Shaw. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our program panelists. This morning, the panel will be moderated by Jason Adelsberger of Newmark. Jason was instrumental in landing the anchor tenant in this project. Jeff LaPour, President and CEO with LaPour Partners. Peter Bug, managing broker at Stream Realty Partners. Stream was the part of the listing team for the land transaction and the leasing and the sale of the building. Architect Brian Manzetti of Powers Brown Architecture, contractor Chris Alcorn, president of Alcorn Construction, and civil engineer Dennis Sobieski, associate office practice leader with Kimley-Horn. Thank you all for joining us today. This will be an open discussion format led by Jason, followed by audience Q&A. If you're an audience member, you may submit questions through the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will do our best to answer them. We would like this to be a vibrant discussion, so please don't hold any questions back. And now I'm going to turn the program over to our moderator, Jason Adelsberger.
Good morning. Thank you, Brian. My name is Jason Adelsberger. I'm an executive managing director at Newmark. I'm an industrial broker that specializes in southeast, somewhat southwest Denver, and happen to represent the tenant that leased 170,000 square feet. I think maybe before the completion of construction of Parc Santa Fe. And so I had spent a lot of time getting to know the project, and I think I can help moderate questions with the development team here and broker of what made this project unique. The tenant that we represented, Terumo, was a medical component manufacturer, and a very skilled labor was going into this project, and it was an automated clean room manufacturing process. In Southwest Denver, after, I don't know, better part of half a year searching, really emerged as a very unique workforce with the likes of Lockheed Martin and not a lot of competition, but also good access to the metro area, a very unique design on this cross-dock building that kind of brought everything together to be a perfect fit for my client. And we ended up getting the building leased from there, and I don't think we would have found a synergy of all functions that we needed there. So that's my involvement with the project. We're going to start with a virtual property tour describing the project, and Peter Bug, managing broker at Stream, will walk us through the key details of the project. And then we'll follow up with a little more detail from Peter about how this project evolved. Peter, this site did not just have a for sale sign on it. As I understood it, it took a lot of years for you to develop the relationships, get control of the site, find a developer, and find the right product that got built on here. So as you describe the project, we'll look forward to hearing from you further about how the thesis for this project came about, and then we'll follow up with Jeff LaPour, the developer, from there.
Great. Thanks, Jason. My name is Peter Bug. Really glad to be here this morning. Interestingly, before I start with a site overview and description of the development, interestingly, how this whole project developed, I'll never forget. It was 2004. I was a runner, associate broker at Frederick Ross Company, actually working with Dave Lee and Jason Adelsberger. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with those guys. They said, Peter, we've got the Southeast market figured out. Why don't you go explore the Southwest market? And so I did. And driving around, I noticed a tree farm, which was called Arapahoe Acres. And Jama, if you pull up slide 8, I can kind of get us oriented here. But anyway, in those days, Evan Klein was the sales manager of Frederick Ross. I was getting paid $1,000 a month by Frederick Ross, and then I'd go to Dave Lee and Jason Adelsberger every month, and they'd pay me $500 each. So that's $2,000 a month. 24 grand a year, that sure motivates you to go out and pound the pavement. So just a little background on the project, but Arapahoe Acres at the time is located at just south of 470 off South Santa Fe Drive. It's a 23-acre site in Douglas County, City of Highlands Ranch. And for 30 years, it was a tree farm nursery, and started calling on the owners of the site in 2004. Interestingly, they, as an industrial broker with a vision for industrial, they really didn't want much to do with me. They had their sights on big box retail, and whether it was a Sam's Club or a Costco, that was the vision here. And over time, fast forward from 2004 to say 2016, after keeping in touch with these owners for all that time, they called me up and they said, you know what, our vision for big box retail is not happening. We cannot get a traffic light at Carter Court in South Santa Fe. We're going to zone it light industrial. What do you think? So I was hired by the owners of the tree farm to sell this site, and took it out to the market. And there was quite a bit of hesitation from the merchant development community, primarily because there hadn't been new industrial development in over 20 years. And so it was really challenging to convince anyone to pay top dollar for this particular site. And this is where I met Jeff LaPour, and he had a vision here that was very similar to ours, and away we went. So again, Parc Santa Fe is located in Douglas County, just south of 470 off Santa Fe Drive, South Santa Fe Drive. Jama, if you could go to slide, let's see, 9. So here's the design of Parc Santa Fe. It's 345,000 feet with 3 different buildings. Building A, front park rear load, just over 85,000 feet. The vision here was with 67,000 cars traveling north and south on Santa Fe every day. we really were targeting the showroom warehouse type occupiers. And so that's the design element for building A, 150 feet deep, 24-foot clear. So we can divide down to 15,000 feet. And we just felt like that design and layout would bode well for the showroom warehouse occupier. Moving east, building B, 170,000 foot cross-dock building. Gosh, I'll never forget. My partner Tyler Reed and Dominic Diorio and I, we had stuck in our head, this is going to be front park, rear load, institutional grade, and Jeff LaPour came up with this idea of putting a cross-dock building here. We thought he lost his mind. We really didn't know him that well at the time. We weren't as close of buddies at that time, and we were trying to figure out how are we going to navigate a development like this, and especially when you think about, when you look at the Southeast and the Southwest market, you combine it together, it's over 40 million feet, 40 million square feet of industrial. There's one cross-dock building in this market for 100,000 feet, and it's in the Southeast market. So how are we going to prove this up? How are we going to sell this to equity? And I got to tip my hat to Jeff LaPour. He had this vision, and good on him because it worked out real well. So building B, 320 foot deep cross-dock building, 28 foot clear. This is where Tarumo BCT landed for their manufacturing facility. Big shout out to Jason Adelsberger, my good friend Jason Adelsberger, and McGrath for bringing us that tenant. I don't think we'd be here today winning such an award without their help getting this building leased. So, and then building C, 180 foot deep rear load building. Very unique. The unique factor to this building is you can do fenced outside storage in the truck court. And our first tenant at Parc Santa Fe was QED, and they were most attracted to the ability to have a big 143 foot deep fenced yard area here to store their goods. And same with Sport Court. They were the tenant down here in the middle of C. Both of these tenants at the north end are utilizing the fenced outside storage feature of these buildings. So 3 different buildings, really targeting 3 different tenants. Gosh, as of today, the project is 70% leased. We just most recently signed a lease with Metro Screenworks for 28,000 feet at the north end of building A. And with that, it's an overview of Parc Santa Fe, and I'll turn it back to Jason.
Jason, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Peter. That was a good overview. We'll come back to you with further questions as we move on. I wanted to jump to Jeff LaPour, the developer of the project. I've met with Jeff many times. We had not done business with their group, as many of us had, until they came to Denver, and became aware of Jeff and his partner Jackson-Shaw in negotiating the deal with Tarumo. But before that, as a broker in Southeast Denver, we thought the project was pretty pioneering. We hadn't seen both some of the product type he brought and the scale of a speculative project in Southwest Denver, as Peter said, probably in 20 years. And so some would have said it was pioneering. Some of us might have said you were a little bit crazy, but you did it. The project looked great, and it's been attractive to tenants. I'd like you to share with us a little bit about what you thought when you came to the site at first, and kind of what you've seen around the country that you thought would work in Denver, and how you're different than some of the large national developers that certainly probably wouldn't have been able to underwrite this site as you did. So thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. when I first came to Denver, I hadn't been to the city in, at least probably 10 years in any meaningful way. And it's probably been closer to 25 or 30. So when I came back to Denver and started to look around, I was quite surprised, pleasantly surprised. I'm from Nebraska originally. And I was quite surprised at just how active and vibrant and diversified a market it had become. And I actually came out specifically to look at this site. A group that I have a relationship with there in Denver sort of put it on my radar, and I worked through the JLL network with some relationships I have in the Phoenix market, where I do quite a bit of work with JLL, and that's how I met Peter and his group. And when we toured the site, first I looked at it kind of from a desktop perspective, and I thought, yeah, I like what I see. Transportation looks good. Quality housing stock nearby looks really good. But when I got into the market reports, that's when I really kind of started to get a little more enthusiastic, and decided, hey, we need to do a deeper dive, because we were at the time looking at a sub 2% vacancy in that market, and we were looking at 0 in the pipeline. Now, some of the guys hit on the fact that maybe that's a negative in some cases, but of the markets that we're in the Western markets, that's difficult to find. I mean, industrial is pretty ramped up everywhere, and you really need to kind of wait your turn now, because most markets that have good demand are fully subscribed. And when I saw this opportunity for what I consider to be a monopoly, we dove in deep and went through some programming with Peter and his team, and went through some pricing exercises with Chris and his team, and tackled and learned some lessons on drainage and local kind of customs there as it relates to site planning and what's acceptable and what's not, because again, we're new to Colorado development, and really hit upon the most efficient site plan we could find. And I didn't realize it at the time, because we build what we call these mini cross docks in multiple markets, and have since the late 90s. And I would say we started out building these buildings at 240 across. So if you spine them down the middle, you're at 120. They have phenomenal flexibility. They have, as we've seen in this case, and I've seen it, I could say, in 5 or 6 other cases, they have the ability to be some of the best manufacturing or assembly type buildings that you can build. The dimensions, the width, the depth, and the ability to convert the parking. And when we looked at the labor pool and started to see who's present there, and what the age of the product and the obsolescence of the product, that's when we, I think, really committed.
Jeff, I don't think you'd actively had any projects in the Denver market at the time. How did you come about meeting your architect and engineer and contractor team for this project?
So, usually when we go to a new market and we meet good people, and we met Peter and his team, and they're great guys, and usually good people stick together. So that's usually where we start. They introduced us to Chris, and we interviewed some big national guys too. And Denver has a nice depth of general contractors there. We talked, I think, to 5 or 6 of them, all the top 2 or 3 usual suspects. And Chris's team was really, had what we like to see in a GC, and that is, his past as a Panatonian and Opus guy. I think, puts him on a level where he understands development, he understands our issues, but he also understands construction. And we went from there. I don't remember if Chris introduced us or if Peter's group perhaps did. Maybe one of you guys would remember that. But anyway, rounding out the team with Dennis and his group, we had what I would consider in any market that we're in an all-star team here.
When we were preparing for this, you had some interesting insights on your thoughts on Denver, on the various submarkets in Denver, and just being out of state. I'm curious your thoughts on Denver going forward and what you see the next 10 years.
Well, one of the things I like the most about Denver is how complicated and expensive it is to build there. We've been a group that's always had to compete from more of an entrepreneurial standpoint, which that translates to problem solving. That translates into, hairy projects. That translates into, working around lots of issues. And Denver doesn't seem to be short there. And certainly from a lifestyle component, it's one of the most desirable places to migrate, and it's going to continue to grow. I mean, great education there, great lifestyle choices. We're bullish on Denver, and I know there's every cycle in every market, but I think long term, Denver is a really, really important player, not just in the Midwest, but also nationally. So, we're working on a second deal, and we'd like to do a third or a fourth, but it's not that easy in that market, which is actually one of our favorite things about it.
Great. I'm going to jump over to Brian Mazzetti, the architect, for a moment, and I'm sure Jeff will want to jump in on some of the other things that he hears as we go along. Brian, the site had a lot of technical and cost restrictions that I'm sure the civil engineers and the contractors will discuss. But I wanted to have you describe how, when you come in and get a survey from Peter Bugh on this site, given the access issues to Santa Fe, which is a state highway, and I guess you'd call it a canal surrounding the site, and just the shape. Typically in South Denver, we just go and draw a bunch of front park rear load buildings and back them up to each other, and here we go. Jeff had experience with these baby cross docks, but I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on the evolution of this project. It's different than what you see in South Denver, and a little bit more of what you'd probably see in East Denver.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of hit the nail on the head. I think our first site plan that we provided to Jeff was nothing but front park rear load with shared truck courts, trying to just maximize coverage as much as possible with those. The site was kind of interesting. I think it was always supposed to be a Costco or like a Super Target. And it's just been kind of, from an industrial standpoint, I don't know how much it was really looked at. Having Santa Fe on the western property line there with the right of way that had to be dedicated to CDOT for future use, we were really concerned up front that we weren't going to be able to get coverage on this site, given some of the constraints of the slope, the canal, and even having the golf course, right on the western border, that we were going to be able to get this thing to hit the coverages that Jeff would need to make it a good deal. And ultimately, thankfully, Jeff kind of pushed us in a few different directions after a number of different site plans. In a different way, Peter kind of mentioned it. This cross dock idea in the Southeast market. We do a lot in the Southwest market. We do a lot in the Southeast. We do a little bit in the South, and this is kind of unique. The goal when we were kind of given the project and said, we want to maximize coverage, but we also want to maximize flexibility. I think the crossdock actually really plays really well into that, specifically when you're looking at multi-tenanting all of these buildings. If you look at the site plan, we've got a 150, building A is a 150, the crossdock's a 320, but you can spine that into two 160s, and then you got a 180 on the eastern side. And so it really generates a good amount of product throughout the park. From a flexibility standpoint, looking at exit strategy and how you're really going to lease this up to the maximum amount of tenants. It was kind of refreshing and nice to see. The great issues, having access. I know these buildings are sloped, so there was a little bit of give and take, from an access standpoint, from trucking and things like that. And we worked. I think we did a man, we probably did 15 different site plans till we kind of landed on one that really worked well with the truck court depths and just kind of maximized as much flexibility as possible.
Yeah. How was, Douglas County isn't a typical industrial hotbed. I mean, some of it's southeast off E470. Was it difficult working with Douglas County, and were there other different municipalities you had to work with that were unique to this site?
Yeah, Chris and Dennis have a couple stories to add to this, but from the architectural standpoint and just going through planning and architecture, Douglas County wasn't that difficult to work with. They were very friendly, from everything from the pre-app all the way down to the building permit, very smooth. There's a lot of different jurisdictions that kind of have authority over the site. I mean, besides the encumbrances on the site, just the slope, the canal, and the golf course. I know, Dennis, there was some issues with the water and things of that nature that weren't really necessarily something that I had to follow through with as much as those guys did.
Yeah, Dennis Sobieski, the civil engineer with Kimley-Horn. Thanks for joining us as well. You had some interesting stories when we were preparing for this, and some unique water districts. And could you share some of the challenges and unique things you came across in this project?
Sure, Jason. Thanks. This was a very interesting and challenging project. Jema, if you could throw up slide 5, that might help us walk through some of this. And I think Bryant alluded to a few of the different districts we had to work with, CDOT being one of them. They turned out to be pretty helpful and not obstruct us too much. One of the challenges that we had was the grade on the site. We had a 30-foot fall from south to north. And if you could go one more, I think just the one that shows the wall and the trees and the canal would be great. So we had some grade from south to north as some discussions developed with the team. And I think, Chris Alcorn was instrumental in this. We ended up sloping the slabs, the finished floors 0.5% from south to north to make up some grade so we can try and balance the site. When we initially looked at this site, we thought, oh, great, we've got the Highline Canal on the north side of us. We'll just dump all of our drainage in there and be done with it. Well, that turned out to be pretty far from reality. As we started working with Denver Water, who's the owner of the canal, they've got a new directive to put 0 drainage into that canal. So we went from putting everything into that canal to having to avoid it completely, which became a real challenge because we wanted to get our storm sewer through there somehow for the drainage outfall. And it just turned into a big challenge. As you can see in this picture, there's hundreds of mature trees along this channel. And in order to put no drainage into that existing Highline Canal, we would have to take out all the trees. So we ended up working pretty extensively with both Denver Water on allowing us to save some of those trees, which meant putting drainage into the channel, and with Douglas County to put some pretty significant walls around the drainage facility, which were much higher than they typically allow. And I think, as Bryant mentioned, Douglas County was pretty easy to work with at the end of the day, but that's not to say they didn't make it interesting along the way. As we were getting variances for some of these walls at every step of the way, there seemed to be something else that we needed to do. And it's like, oh, well, I have to get my assistant director to sign off, or there was just always an additional step, which just made it really anxious up until the 11th hour when we finally did get it approved. And then one of the bigger components, I think, since we, where we were going to tie our outfall in, as you can see our pond right there, the storm outfall really wanted to go to the north. But because we were challenged with the canal, the two options we were kind of left with were, one, going out into Santa Fe and dealing with CDOT and having about 1 mile of storm sewer north on Santa Fe, which, dollar signs and process really pop up as a roadblock there. or going to the east through the golf course, which meant we then had to deal with the golf course and with Highlands Ranch Metro District. So Chris and I spent a significant amount of time meeting with the golf course. And again, Chris was really instrumental in this process. Eventually, at the end of the day, we did get the storm sewer tie-in approved through the golf course with no shortage of easements and headaches for Jeff to sign away. But turned out to be a great project, certainly a lot of challenges along the way.
Well, thank you. Let's jump to Chris Alcorn for a moment. Chris Alcorn was the contractor for the building with Alcorn Construction. We've seen Chris in a lot of successful projects in Southeast Denver and obviously this project in Southwest Denver. Chris, do you want to share with us? I know we've discussed that, you know, when you come into these projects at the beginning, it's obviously a pricing exercise first. There's what can be built, what does the market want, but you know the scope and size of this project was bigger than it had been built in Southwest Denver, and I'm curious how you guys looked at the pricing of build the whole project versus and build a cross dock versus maybe doing more buildings that were smaller.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. We were involved in the early site planning, and we basically ran, as they would come up with a site plan, we would price it and give feedback to the team. And I think it's Jeff that came up with the crossdock, and we refer to it as a crossdock, but really, I'm not sure it was ever meant to be a quote crossdock where you bring product in with one side and out the other. I think it was always thought that it would be a front park, front load on two sides, and that it would be demised. I think obviously hit it out of the park with finding a single tenant for the building. But what that did, if I were to build, this project was about $60 a square foot for site work and core shell and design. So in today's dollars, that's closer to 70. If I were to build 4 80,000 square foot buildings to get roughly the same square footage, that would be closer to $80 a square foot. So, and this, whereas the cross-dock facility is like, let's see, 61. So in today's dollars. So by blending the large building and the small building, we were able to get a today's dollar build out of about $70 a square foot. So that saved, call it $8 to $10 a square foot over building 4 80s and having front park, front load across the board. So, and then you're going to probably put a demising wall down the middle. That demising wall probably costs you $1 a square foot on the whole. And then you end up with basically 4 80,000 square foot buildings for $8 or $10 a square foot less than if you had built 4 80,000 square foot buildings. And you get the shared truck courts that are beneficial, maximize your site coverage. So I think that was probably the feedback that Jeff needed once we hit that site plan that said like, okay, we're on to something here. And I think he's done that in other markets, but we provided that feedback.
I was surprised when I came to town too, just at the difference in cost. And I get that the weather's different, and that's certainly a big factor. Climate drives a lot of cost difference between Southwest and Denver, but just in general, and sort of the length of time it takes to execute the plan. I remember a funny story. I came to Denver. I didn't tell Chris's team, and I called John, who was in the trailer there, and I said, "Hey, John, how's it going?" And he said, "Man, it's busy. We're packed. We got the sites crawling with people." And I was like a block away, so I pulled into the trailer and I walked up, and he's happy to see me. Great guy. And I said, he goes, "Look at this." And I said, "Man, where's all your people?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" And he was like totally serious, and so was I. I said, "Well, where is everybody?" He goes, "Look at the site. It's packed." I said, "You mean those guys over in the corner on the building over there?" He goes, "Yeah." And then Chris and I talked about it, and I guess, just labor is difficult there. So, between weather and labor, I was really surprised at just the sheer difference and impact it has on the process.
We did have a very wet year that particular year. We had a lot of snow. It was a great ski season, but not so great for construction.
Chris, and I think Jeff's probably new to it. Are the soil conditions in Southwest Denver as challenging as I know we all see in Southeast Denver? A lot of clay and adds quite a bit of costs and foundations versus building on sand in the middle of the city. Did this site present anything unique on that side, or was there were there other surprises or challenges you came across in constructing the building?
They're similar to Southeast. We have some expansive soils. When you go to North Denver, you get a lot of sand, and sometimes you can get more favorable geotechnical report conditions. But yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head. It was probably a 6-foot over-X and recompact underneath the slab. That's pretty typical for Southeast or Southwest or Central Denver. One of the big challenges that we hit up against, it was not necessarily a constructability, but somewhat an approvals issue. And something I want to point out to the people on the call, it was a lesson learned for me and for the team, I think, is we had a very unique water district that they gave us a will serve letter. They were challenging to deal with. They wouldn't speak with anybody until you had paid your fee and signed their agreement. And even though they gave us a will serve, they didn't really have water. They bought their water from Centennial Water, which was right across the street. And the real rub was that in order to buy that water, they needed to put in master meters. And since we were this little bubble that was the only piece of property served in the area, there were some other areas off to the east that are residential that they serve, but we were just this one property bubble. This property ended up having to pay the freight for those 2 master meters just for this property. And I think they were about $250,000 a piece. So that was an uncomfortable conversation that Jeff and I had to have, about mid-project, and was a big surprise. But the lesson I learned is, sure, you get a will serve letter, but you dig a little deeper and say, okay, well, where does that water come from? Do you have to buy it? Are there any special equipment that's required or piping that's required in order to get it onto the site? How expensive is that? Am I paying that, or are you paying that? Those are some questions I think anywhere in the metro area you could actually get burned with, because water obviously is very expensive here, and it is a huge commodity that has a pretty big impact on our construction.
So Chris, you build buildings all over town. Do you see this elsewhere in your other developments where you've got multiple water districts? It's made our permitting process exceedingly challenging and lengthy more over anything. Do you see this elsewhere?
We do. In fact, it's pretty common for Denver Water to sell their water to, you have Fruitdale or North Washington, or, all these districts that are the water district, but in reality, they buy their water from Denver Water. And so you have, in essence, you have 2 approvers on those plans. And the Denver Water portion can be kind of lengthy as far as their approvals go. They're pretty busy. So we do see that, but this was very unique. I've never seen anything in 25 years working here where you had that kind of onerous a deal to get water from the other side of the street when a municipality or water district gave you a will serve letter that said they had water. It was kind of unique.
And Chris, I could piggyback on that. So this district in particular was very challenging just because they were sort of a ghost. They didn't respond. They didn't get back to us. It was, the master meters that Chris is talking about is something that popped up at the 11th hour. So they were sort of making it up as they went along. I don't think they knew their process and didn't seem to really have an interest in the project, even though they were the ones that needed to approve it. So we were, essentially held hostage with these guys. It seemed like every, the first round of comments that we waited for took about 8 months to get them to respond, despite reaching out, dozens and dozens of times. There was really nobody to call on the phone because they didn't really exist as an entity. So it was every time we'd get comments, there seemed to be something new that popped up. So it was definitely a unique experience, and I think we all hope we don't have to deal with them ever again.
That was the one major challenge, and the other one was, I think Dennis brought up, was getting across the golf course. We had to negotiate. We had to actually well, initially we proposed taking out a tee box and then putting it back, obviously. And I think they said, no, we don't want you to disturb the tee box. So we said, well, can we move it over here, and can we bend it this way? And I mean, there was a lot of meeting with the golf course. They were great to deal with. That golf course is owned by the University of Denver, and the folks there were great to deal with. But the other option was pumping, and there was a very significant cost of pumping that storm sewer. So I don't know if you guys remember, at some point we had kind of an inflection point where we said, I think we can get it across the golf course. Let's abandon the pumping idea. And then it was a matter of getting it to happen, negotiating with the stakeholders, and getting them to agree to let us do it. So.
And I think the golf course's major hangup was that they had previous projects that had done some improvements on their course, and they had made a lot of promises, and they didn't exactly happen, and they left the golf course in pretty poor condition. So we had the privilege of trying to ensure them that everything was going to get done the right way, and they weren't going to be kind of left holding the bag. So it was a lot of conversation.
What was nice though about that deal is that in the end, the golf course group was really reasonable. Mm-hmm. And in other markets, particularly further west you go, that might have been a different outcome. And I think, I'm not sure, somebody on the team either had a relationship or some familiarity with one of the guys that was sort of overseeing the golf course, which certainly helped. But given how complex that could have been, you guys did a great job of making it pretty simple, at least from our experience.
Yeah, I had previous dealings with I think the head of facilities at.
Yeah, that's right.
EU, and so we worked with him, and then Scott, the groundskeeper, to make it all happen. Yeah, it may have been a different outcome if there wasn't that trust that had been built from previous projects. I think that's how Denver works. Is it's a small town, and you build relationships, you build trust, and it makes a big difference.
That's nice to see.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, while we have you, I think a lot of the audience would be curious to see your thoughts on construction and costs and challenges going forward in 2021. I think there's a perception of inflation and commodity prices rising, and thoughts on new administration and labor, and there's obviously quite a few industrial buildings still being built around town, and how that pipeline looks, and a little different from this project, but I think we'd all love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we've seen, year over year, the last 3 years, we've seen costs increasing by 5 or 6%. That's why I took Parc Santa Fe was bought out in 2017, so $59, $60 a square foot. 3 years, that's for about $69, $70 a square foot for present costs. We have seen probably since third quarter of last year and into this first quarter, we've seen about a 5% dip in pricing. So when we go to buy out or lock in GMPs, we are seeing some buyout savings, which is great. That being said, the market's getting heated back up. We have 6 or 8 buildings starting just in January and February, 6 or 8 different projects. And I think we're not unusual in Denver or nationally. Steel is a big challenge. Price of steel has gone up. We just got a cost increase last month on a 150,000 square foot building. It was roughly $150,000, so $1 a square foot. And we're told that we're going to get another steel increase in March. We're also, there's challenges with lead times, particularly on joist and deck. Stuff coming out of Volcraft is getting to be pretty long lead times. I've heard potentially 5 months, 5 to 6 months. So you do have to be on top of things, and in some cases try to get those joist and deck approved sometimes before the CDs are done. in order to maintain your schedules. So I do see commodity prices ticking back up. There is a lot of demand. Wood, we don't use a lot of wood here, but obviously everybody knows wood has been just astronomically, the fourth quarter last year went up astronomically. So we are seeing particularly things that are impacted by the national market where there's national demand. We're seeing some pretty heavy increases. So I would expect by second quarter that we're kind of back at par. And then we'll just have to see from there whether the demand continues and whether it levels off or whether it continues at kind of that 5 to 6% it's been doing. Jeff might be able to speak to more macro, what he thinks is going to happen in the broader economy and whether the demand is going to really lead to that cost escalation going back up, or whether he thinks it's going to level off or we're oversupplied. Or, Jeff, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think labor was always like the topic last time. Like when I first came to Denver, labor was a big deal. Availability, pay, that type thing, and just I think the ability to like staff a job appropriately. Has that softened a little bit, Chris? Have employees left the market as like other product types like hotel, retail, those types of things that aren't being built? Or is it sort of steady?
Yeah, no, it hasn't really. I would say the PPP allowed businesses to maintain their staff throughout the dip, and I think most businesses of our size and our subcontractors saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and so they weren't just ditching overhead and letting people go. We paid our people their full. We let a couple people go, as is healthy for a company where you have a couple of weak players and you let a couple go. But that was 10% of our staff, 4 people out of 40. But after that, we really want to hang on to our staff. They're great people and they do a great job for us. And they're what enables us to come back strong this spring, because things are. I mean, it was in October. It was hang on for dear life as far as opportunities and proposals and bids and budgets went. And now we're seeing that where we need the people to do the work. So I don't think that we've lost a lot of labor. I think we've stayed pretty stable. And through probably fourth quarter and the first quarter of this year, maybe there's a little extra capacity if you're ready to go, that you get some extra staff on a job. But the problem is everybody's now in the same rhythm. It seems like, when there was no work, there were a couple of guys extra fourth quarter and first quarter. And now everybody wants service all at the same time. And we're right back, if not worse. I mean, I don't normally start 8 buildings and
yeah, we're seeing that in Las Vegas too. We had permitted and priced a 4-story tilt-up office building in the Las Vegas market, awarded some of the contract work December, January of last year, which was the zenith of pricing that we look back on now. Rolled into March and we were still buying things out, and we had done some site work, and then we clearly March 15th we hit the stop button because it was Las Vegas was hit as hard as anything. Travel dried up, the city's local economy was really uncertain, and so was the state of California, which is a big feeder for us. So we just stood down from March, April, May, and then we went back out to price some of the bigger scopes of work. And we ended up, and I think it was just really timing more than anything, the psychology of the timing really, because those were some super uncertain times. I don't think anybody had any visibility whatsoever was going to happen. Yep. People were working from home for the first time. You turn on CNN or whatever, and you're basically terrified by the time you turn it off. We repriced the building. It's 100,000 square feet, and we got about $3 a foot out of it. I think just sort of what I would almost just call like fear factor, or hey, everybody cut just a little bit to try to get a pipeline. But to your point, we have a project under construction here, industrial in Las Vegas. It's about 330,000 feet, real similar to Parc Santa Fe. And it's a battle for the concrete guy because he's stretched so thin. Everybody needs him. And there's a lot of large tilt ups going on out in North Las Vegas, which is kind of similar to your airport I-70 market for you guys. And, Prologis and these guys are building, 750s, 800s, 900s, a million. They're knocking out Amazons. They're doing so much work that I think if you called the concrete guy right now, he'd say he's doing the best he's ever done in his life. So I think there was a tiny pause, but man, it's back. It's back. And I think it's going to just keep ratcheting.
Jeff,
cost-wise.
What we've seen, and and Peter can jump in on this too. What I think we've seen in Denver, everyone wants to talk about the e-tailers and the large growth in their square footage. But what we've also seen is a lot of them going to build to suits. And while there's a lot of spec construction in the market, these build to suits don't necessarily help absorb that square footage. So my question is, how are you seeing spec construction going forward? Or are you targeting acquiring land that you might be ready to do a build to suit, do build to suits on? And then Peter, also following up on that is, you probably got as much visibility as anyone does as activity in the Southwest Denver market's very unique. Are you seeing those e-tailers, quote, last mile, getting down to that market yet, or is that to come? And I know you don't have a whole lot of square footage left to really be attractive to them, but I know you do a lot of work down there. I'll let you go first, Jeff. No, Jeff. Peter?
So
I'm having technical difficulties here.
So yeah, I'll take it from there. When we first put Parc Santa Fe under contract with Jeff, immediately went after the big e-commerce, the Amazons, and we pursued those e-commerce groups full throttle, and not much interest. And that's surprising to me when you factor in all the rooftops in Highlands Ranch and Sterling Ranch. It seemed like a prime location for next day delivery e-commerce, and to our surprise, did not get much interest.
Yeah, it sounds like it just hasn't gotten there yet.
And what do you think, Jay? Don't you think? I mean, would you agree with that vision of e-commerce down there?
Southwest is so isolated that, and when traffic gets back to normal, there is still a lot of growth to happen down that way. It just has to come. It can't make sense to transport that far all over town for all these 2-hour delivery type things. Jeff, were you able to hear my question earlier?
I didn't hear it, Jason. I was flipping back and forth, but I can hear now.
Yeah, so I'll quickly ask it again. What we've seen is a lot of these large e-commerce deals happening, but a lot of them aren't happening in spec construction. And we have millions of square feet under construction speculatively. Is this going to change the way you look at development around the country? Are you acquiring dirt to stand by for build to suits, or are you still comfortable that there's plenty of smaller tenants other than the large e-commerce, and that you're going to build speculatively for them? It seems to be an interesting dichotomy right now.
Yeah, we don't compete a whole lot with the e-com guys. We might get 100,000 foot last mile deal or something, or an 80 or a 90, but certainly the majority of the competition has come at the bigger levels. Everybody wants to do less transactions, do larger deals. But we haven't had, we're battling cost increases. We're battling lack of available land, but we target infill, and we do 3-4 projects a year. We're not doing 20 or 30. So we still feel pretty good about these sort of rifle shot opportunities, buy 20 or 30 acres here or there, try to do it in a single phase, but do it in an infill location. Our model hasn't changed, but we're a lot more, we're hypersensitive to forward supply for sure, and competitive pressures.
Are you seeing a lot of build to suit around the other markets you're going to, as we're seeing here, or is there more adequately designed and available spec product for those requirements?
We're seeing a few build to suits here or there, but there's so far been enough. Standing inventory to accommodate guys, unless it's super specialized.
Great. Hey, Brian, one of my last questions is just for you and what you're seeing out there. You see any trends that are changing in the design of
properties that have modern amenities,
industrial
well located?
Obviously, I think we're seeing a lot more planning for additional trailers and additional delivery vehicles. How's kind of the pipeline look for you in 2021, and are you seeing any major shifts in design?
That's kind of interesting. I didn't get quite all of your question there, but to the last portion of it, pipeline for 2021 is looking really good. We're seeing a lot of local and out-of-state developers kind of come into the market and look at different areas. The north has got a lot of activity. Northeast has got a lot of activity. Southwest, couple projects on the west side. I'm sorry, southeast. Couple projects on the west side. With that comes a bit of a change to design aesthetic. If you notice from like the LaPour project down here, it's when we worked with Jeff on this one, it kind of, we did our typical Denver design, flyby panels, things of that nature. Jeff really pushed it towards more of a Southwest design in terms of like heavier structures, kind of less moves, but more intentional moves to kind of make the buildings more attractive, which actually worked great for industrial design in terms of setting up the office in the corners and making sure you have enough entries to really multi-tenant these things. So we're seeing a little bit of that shift. In terms of site amenities, trailer storage and dock size is really becoming kind of the hot topic, especially in some of the other markets. I mean, we're seeing, as you know, in the Southeast, my direction's right, Southeast, trailer storage has been a real asset to a number of structures that have been built there over the last couple of years from a development and exit strategy standpoint. Obviously in Aurora and Thornton, that's, Northern Thornton, that's going to be the same thing. But really with the influx of people taking a shot at different deals, we're seeing a huge change. One thing that's kind of come up more recently than anything is really getting buildings like this solar ready. From a steel structural standpoint, it's, that's still kind of in its infancy, and I don't know if that's really going to take off. But with some of the changes in the jurisdictional requirements, Denver's got some initiatives to go all electric soon. Same with Thornton. Some of those types of things, future-proofing buildings to kind of have that built into the spec condition, as opposed to doing it later down the road where you're going to spend, almost 400 times the money to retrofit a building. Is something that we're taking a look at. But from a site standpoint, it's really still about access, parking, trailer storage, and truck court depth.
Great, interesting. Well, thank you for sharing with us. Unless there's any other questions from the audience or the team wants to share anything else, I want to thank Jeff. Jeff put together an all-star team here of architects who I've worked with and brokers and engineers and contractors. So all of you guys did an incredible job on this. I know the tenant I brought to the project, very happy. It was appropriate building to put a high capital investment project into, a high quality building. So if there's anything else you guys would like to close out with, feel free. And otherwise, thank you.
I would just say that, Denver is, I can understand why there is demand to come there. The quality of life is good, but the people are really good. And, working with you on the tenant side, working with Dennis and Bryant and Chris and Peter and his team, I think most everybody we touched in that market was a great experience for us. And you know, you don't see that all the time, especially as you further kind of west you get. So it was a pleasant, it was actually a great experience because we had a great exit too, of course. But even without that, you know, we appreciate the relationships we've made there and look forward to doing some more work there.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks again, Jason, and all our panelists for sharing their time and expertise. Count myself amongst the industrial experts in the market who passed on this opportunity and thought that it was a pretty crazy location. And I was pleasantly surprised to see how successful it's been. And I think that's a testament to how Denver has evolved in the industrial market specifically. We'd like to acknowledge today's program sponsors again: Brownstein Hyatt, Farber Schreck, Newmark, Alcorn Construction, and Interior Environments. We'd like to encourage all of the attendees to complete a post-webinar survey that you will receive in your email. A video of today's presentation will be available in the NAIOP YouTube page later this week. Please mark your calendar on February 16th for the next installment of the Virtual Property Tour and Case Study Series featuring NAIOP's 2020 Community Impact Award honoree, the Quail, developed by Zocalo. Registration is now open. Please visit our website at NAIOP Colorado for more details. We plan to resume this series. This was the inaugural year. 2020 was the inaugural year. We plan to resume this series in April, featuring the Development Award winners to be named at NAIOP's Annual Awards of Achievement on February 25th. Again, visit the NAIOP website for more details. Thanks again for joining us today.